Oh man.
Yeah, we need to record this. This is going to be for future stake and tokens.
All right, so
Yes.
Newman asked, what is tokenomics to begin with? And some people think, oh, well, tokenomics is that these people are allocated 18% and those people are allocated 42% and some other fractions of whatever token is allocated in these ways to different people. And in the world economy, of course, a certain number of people hold a certain percentage of fiat, and it's all unbalanced. But the bigger picture really is like, where's the value in the economy? The value in the economy is not generally where massive amounts are being held. The flow of money, it's called currency, like currents in a river. The flow is generally the place where there's value. When money is flowing, value is created. The way I think of tokenomics is like, what are the mechanisms of flow for the tokens, and how does the presence of the token enable people to generate a stream of useful revenue out the end?
And that's what an economy is, right? It's sort of like the movement around of value, tokens, money, currency. We talk about not currency, utility. It's like this token has utility, as kind of a defense against just like, we're just making a bunch of speculative value. Maybe that might be, because we're true in the crypto space, everyone's trying to get away from speculative value. And like, I had this sneaky suspicion that most of what we're dealing with in the value in our economy is speculative value. It's just like, oh, the market's going to crash and now my home is worth 10-20% less, and my money is worth, due to inflation is worth 10% less. And it's just like, oh, this, like, what's like real value and what's speculative value, and these new ways of doing it, do they have a better mousetrap, like in a community, like in a guild, like we were talking about before before the recording. Haha, you weren't here, you guys missed it, sorry YouTube. We were like, does that guild, like, can they get the most of their value? I don't know, maybe that's where I'll stop there. Like that value thing, I think it could be really good.
Yeah, I think
it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Go ahead, Maya.
Oh yeah, it made me think about like we asked, what is a token? I mean, token gives you a certain value, or it gives you a certain stake in a whole pool. But for me, what comes up like, what is a stake then? Because part of, what do you include in that value? And that especially came up when we were talking about marketing agencies and everything. And I remember working for an agency where people were not paid that grand, but they got the stake to be part of these, really, really big brands, and they could put that back on their history, on their reputation, that they worked on these brands. So,
that was the most incentive they got.
Yeah, that you can't imagine how many do that, but the thing that you could have this opportunity with little experience to work on these big brands was something people would really sacrifice a couple of years for, because you don't get that even with education, and afterwards you can go and get whatever job you want because you did the thing. So like stake there was your reputation got some credit there,
right? What are we accounting for?
Yeah,
with these tokens.
So bragging rights doesn't seem like nearly enough.
No, no.
No,
Bragging rights.
that would be speculative of some of sorts, but it
Bragging.
does build towards reputation, which is, yeah, I think plays into tokenomics, especially for DAOs. So you track all sorts of things, so you're counting for all sorts of value in niche packets according to the skills that are represented by the contributors. So I see it as accounting, and then at macro, it's economics, and we call it tokenomics, but that's massively distracting and noisy, kind of, to, I think, the accounting of what are we trying to track here.
Yeah. Ooh.
So just to recap a little bit of the earlier part of the conversation, Sandy was bringing forward a slightly different perspective on contribution as a creator and as a founder of an agency of creatives. He's in a position to kind of ride the fence and have one foot in I'm directly contributing to an organization like Done Collectively, but I'm also advocating for my organization and its role. And I think that there's a really interesting opportunity, and it's kind of a sidetrack from tokenomics per se, but in the context of Done Collectively, I really want to enable interdependencies between entities in our ecosystems. And unless we have some mechanism for an agency to be one of the organizations on our platform and enable them to hold tokens in some of the other organizations on our platform, I don't think we can really have a good interdependency-based ecosystem. But if we can, and it's like easy to do that, create that kind of interdependency, I think that opens up some really interesting opportunities for different kinds of agency style service providers to create this diversified portfolio of stake in many organizations, while also earning like the money they need to actually support their people.
Yeah. And
Sandy or Peter, did I miss anything in the recap way?
That was very good. And I think also there was a point I wanted to add, but let me remember. I lost it a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I ran over what Newman had something to say while I got a little excited and then jumped into the deep end with my accounting spiel. But yeah,
I remember. It was the concept of Mayo's right. A lot of these creatives, they want portfolio work, and they believe that the only way they can obtain portfolio work is by joining one of these agencies so that they can get the bragging rights. But the bragging rights, they don't even really know how to properly leverage, because at the end of the day, it also too comes down to their own personal goals. So in my head also too, just really formulating a possibility where the incentive for having these creatives come in and operate under an agency that participates in staking and working with these blockchain projects, it could be one of those things of like, hey, these organizations and these projects need the services that you wouldn't be allowed to operate on your own and at any other level. And these projects are very sophisticated. They just need sophisticated marketing to also match it up. And these opportunities for you to lead these projects and have these opportunities, these portfolio building opportunities that you wouldn't get anywhere else, are available to you here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that can connect to the agency.
because the agency, and that's wonderful. I think that's exactly right, because the agency could monetize or frame the social reputation value. They can say, look, if like for instance, I think it's a tragedy when folks do those reputation building internship stuff, but then they don't capitalize on it. All these words have little different meanings when you put them in this, but they don't like create the really killer portfolio or make the big leap connections that they need to in order to really make those opportunities go as far as possible. And I think it has a lot to do with just like the individual worker's intention, and then the Arbeit giver, the work giver, the project, their intentions. Like do they really care about like giving the intern, let's just say, or the creative working at a lower rate? Do they care? Or they, like, you see what I mean? Like, I think an ecosystem could be framed where you're like, oh yeah, this is an important job that we need done, and we can't really pay full rate, but we will support someone and give them the platform or the perspective to capitalize, I guess. Yeah, that and I think that's what you were saying, Sandy. Like that's what I got from it. That's great. It's great. Meaning that we could build a system that makes the social reputation like a real thing, because it's kind of a dicky thing when someone says, well, I have a super brand and I'm not going to pay you anything, but it's just a great portfolio building experience. And you're just like, meh, no, that's kind of dicky,
Come help me
It's
for
like,
some
oh,
tokens.
that's like that's the influencer. Isn't that like that's kind of the new model? Because they didn't. You feel
exactly
me.
that. Exactly that.
It
People
happens all the
contacting like,
time.
we're so cool, like do the free work. Yeah,
I feel so understood. No, it happens a lot. I mean, I imagine it happens in all cities, but it happens a lot here in New York City, where a brand will incentivize you and make you feel like you can help them. And then they'll be like, hey, you'll get so many opportunities from this. But then they also bottleneck you and don't educate you on anything. They don't teach you anything. So that's one thing we're doing differently here with everybody that, all the creatives that we bring into the agency and that we train, we give them all the information. I was working with a videographer. I don't remember what state he was in, but I told him, I'm like, hey man, like, what do you want to do? Like, you're going to help us and we're going to pay you, but I want to educate you. Like, what are you trying to do long-term? You might just be a videographer now, but do you want to own an agency? Do you understand the different dynamics of owning an agency? Do you understand what a franchise prototype is and how you need to make systems you can actually scale in order to make profit long-term? So I think education is also too, I'm thinking about currencies that actually have value and not just speculative value. And time is one thing. One thing we always sell is how can we save people time? And that comes through education, and also education too. So I think those two currencies of education and time saving are huge, and we can focus on that. And I think we could attract a lot of people like, hey, you want portfolio work? No agency is going to let you to handle such a big responsibility. But not only will you let you handle this responsibility, you'll also be educated on how to do it correctly, and then kind of be given the framework and the ecosystem to do it correctly. You just have to follow it up with the work.
Let me jump in because I love the opposite. So what you just described, Sandy, was like a very beautiful way of like how this new way would work. But on the opposite, like if we just multiply by -1, like there are agencies or groups like you that are just they don't care, and they're pulling people in. I'm not being I guess I am being negative. Yeah, they're exactly. These guys are strip mining talent, and like there's just they're part of their business model is they know that there's a new guy learning this software and can do passable work, and they can get them for 6 months, and that's that's
But those are
yeah, I'm glad.
power games. Yeah, those are power games, and that's not like only like the agencies doing, but that's also the brands doing to agencies. Like that is just totally insane. But you know, can't name names, but you know, seeing big brands just doing it like tomorrow we want to have the thing at, you know, at 5 o'clock in the evening. Tomorrow we're going to have the thing. We're big. Otherwise, we're going to knock on the other door and you're going to lose this forever. And we're actually not going to pay you any overtime, you know. And that is the standard practice. That's how they get the best of the best. That's how they, you know, get the awards and whatnot, because they just push these, you know, dangle these carrots, and sometimes, you know, they form relationships with these creative agencies or creatives. But in both times, they feel, well, we have the power, and you have to play the game. But you know, it doesn't have to be like that. I hope in Web3 world. that is the thing. Like, how far can we? You know, what kind of incentives are different, and you know, how are they different? You know, so what are also the new opportunities? Because if we're not like looking at this capitalism power model and cooperative model of, you know, we are distributed, so what can arise there is, I think, a very interesting question.
I have an intuition that half of the people who play the extractive game just want to like take advantage of people, and that it's only half, and the other half are playing that game just because it's all they know how to do, because it's hard, genuinely hard to do anything else. And I'm inspired to create ways for those kinds of people to just have an easy track to actually allocate incentives and create desired behaviors as a result. And that's really what tokenomics design is about. But nobody knows, like Peter said in the announcement, nobody's an expert on tokenomics design. Even the people who are like selling tokenomics services, like they're not expert. They're just figuring things out. And every time they're figuring it out on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Well, here's this situation. Let's design tokenomics for you. And it's not an expertise. It's a capability of doing design work in tokenomics. Whereas I'm inspired to create some sorts of incentive patterns to make it easy for us to share, but for us, where us could be any organization on our platform, to share equitable rewards between all the contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And then like what behaviors are desired? Well, that would be something that each organization may need to figure out for themselves, and then connect those desired behaviors to proposed rewards, but within a structure of rewards that they don't have to figure out what the structure is. They just have to figure out what kind of or what value horizon is contemplated. One of the other questions that's come up for us is which portion of a person's market rate can be paid now, needs to be paid now, versus accrued for future payment. And maybe even, okay, so if they do accrue some of that market rate for future payment, that deferred value should lead, I think, to a profit share. And I think everyone would identify with that purpose and goal if they're not just intending to take advantage of other people. And then another element that has arisen in our exploration has been the element where like there can be a not like I spent this amount of time, but I created a certain amount of impact, and so delivered impact can lead to profit share. I wonder if that causes anything to come up for you guys.
Yeah, and
You said it a
assessing
lot, man.
impact.
Yeah. The idea
The
of time versus
assessment.
impact. Yeah.
The assessment of impact is subjective.
That's true.
And it's one of those things where the old way, I think, Peter, you had mentioned this, it's just like it's easy to measure one's time. It's just like I did this time, and the impact is a little squishier, you know, it is subjective. Time objective, impact subjective. But it can be done, and it probably
you can turn subjective, well, you can through structure, you can create objectivity around impact, around assessing impact, but then you are enslaved to that structure. But there is efficiencies for this. That's why humans make structure, because there's efficiencies in the in that accounting that can take something that is subjective for multiple people and create something that the group can then objectively make decisions around,
or at least arrive at a consensus around.
Yeah. And that's why I really resonate with your opinion here on one of these cards, that our goal is to create a box where you can bottom up decide these types of incentive structures and do it for yourself, so that who you're going to blame other than you and the people you sat down to create that with. Now, you know, that at that point it turns into a set and setting game, is getting everybody in the right mindset where they're not ready to just get rid of people, or, you know, as they're committing to themselves and to the group their intentionality, and then locking themselves in for a set amount of time, or locking themselves into a mechanism that they can then evolve and iterate. But it's the establishment of that mindset, I feel like, that's the harder part. But it can be facilitated. It can only be facilitated inside this little sandbox that you would create, that you were trying to create, that allows everyone at the table to come up with the structure that then they sign their name next to. This is how we're working. Yes, we can change it. This is the process by which we go about changing it, so on and so forth into the future.
So we've talked about some specific tokenomics techniques of issuing profit share tokens, and more specifically than just generic profit share tokens, but like specifically profit share tokens that last for a year, because people delivered a year of impact. Or like taken from the startup space, where people get stock options, and the stock options vest over 4 years. You could issue a profit share token that's worth a year of profit share, but it doesn't vest until next year. Or you might be a salesperson, and you might get a profit share token that is good for as long as the customer that you brought in is still a customer, and it's worth 5% of their gross profit or their net profit.
You have the revenue brought. Okay, it might be switching. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
And I don't have a specific technique for enabling this mechanism of sales commission profit shares, but it's one of the ideas that has been floating around is to just like to be capable of addressing these kinds of scenarios. A kind of contributor that has done something that is that has generated an impact over 5 years or 10 years could earn the kind of profit share token that lasts 5 or 10 years. And when the impact of a contribution is not a 5-year impact, maybe it's a 3-year impact. And then we're back to what you were saying, Peter, about like the cultural level of how we figure out together by consent what time horizon of rewards we're offering.
Yeah, to ourselves. Yeah.
And to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas, I'd love to hear what you think when we talk about these kinds of things.
Thinking about this right now. Can you hear me okay?
A little low.
It's a little quiet.
It's a little quiet. Okay. So is this
There we
better?
go.
Too much now? Okay.
A little too much,
Cool.
but yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Good.
So, hi. Sorry, I've been just sitting in and I've actually sort of multitasking, but it's great to sit in and to, so jumping into, maybe you notice my face of intrigueness now, because this notion of giving something to someone, but it's actually going to expire because they brought a client that's only valid or that sort of thing, is like, you're not really, it sounds like from a third person point of view that you're granting it, you're allowing him to use it for a while, but then if it expires, did the person really have ownership of it?
Mm.
If you're giving someone a possibility to use that value, or not even, I can't say you're giving him the ownership, you're giving him a temporary ownership. So in terms of, I understand obviously that it makes some sense from the point of view that you were conceptualizing it, but on the other hand, I come from accountancy. You either have something or you don't, and it's like if you're giving something to someone that's expiring, it feels like either you gave them sort of a commission, and because the organization made that sort of profit, and it's now his right to forever to do whatever he wants. And in that sense, it sounds like you're giving him sort of a memoir that's going to fade away of what he did, and he either uses it or not. And actually, I'm sorry to just add one extra thing that's going to maybe sound almost a bit rough from my part, but coming back to what we have in countries where currency is constantly deflating, you know what that is, right? So what that is the government it's often compared to almost modern slavery, where you make your buck this week and you better go and spend it, because if you come back, because we want you to come back next week to work for the next buck. But obviously that's a very, very far-fetched example. I'm just throwing some dimensions into, it's basically an echo of what was going through my mind as I was hearing.
It's that extractive pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one-time commission for salespeople is also the extractive pattern. Most organizations that I've had exposure to, like, information about how the commission structure works is that there's always a limit on how much commission the original salesperson gets, and it's more typical actually for like the current account representative on that account to get today's commission rather than the person who actually created that original impact. I don't know what exactly the right balance is. Because that person who's currently serving the account is obviously delivering some value too. But the purpose of this idea of a sales commission profit share would be that that person created long-term value, and so we shouldn't just give them a temporary reward that they can put in their bank account and then they've got to go make more sales, but like the created value that lasts long term. So why should they not have access to a stream of revenue from that? My hope is that the way we frame it is reflective of the intent and the purpose for that reward to be larger than a classic hey, you made the sale, here's your commission, transactional, wipe your hands clean and you're done situation.
Interesting. Yeah, when Lucas was talking, what came to me was also that ownership indeed. But like the Web3 like kind of provides you also different ways to kind of distribute that. And like one of the things we've been playing with some groups is like the holonic ownership, that you can sort of distribute it between different groups. And you can be a group, you can be a person, you can still have those different kind of forms. It's kind of really interesting, how far can we push it? But I must say again as well, I'm also into complex measurements of impact, and I'm always so cautious with it, as in like there's so much wrong has been done to, for example, a lot of really charities and agencies, doing these kind of health impact or kind of work, because they were asked, measure everything. And that kind of soft and warm data that's needed to actually understand the wider impact was very often disregarded as, well, it's just this soft and fuzzy thing, instead of that actually being the heart. This being the heart of what they do is the soft fuzzy thing, and they're being good at it, but that's being dismissed because of the measurements imposed on top of it. So that's kind of such a tension there in me when I talk about this topic.
So that makes me think. Yeah, go ahead.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll take it. Because I think that one of the things that we can do as tool builders, like we can measure different stuff, right? And the whole, like one of the foundational things that like, oh crap, I'm coming to these meetings, it's a data structure. It's just a system of parameters and like little boxes where, things go. And those measurements, like if we can, all we have to do is just change, well, one of the things that we can do is change the measurement. And I feel that the organizations and the game and the information flow and the value flow and the economy, oh gosh, the economy can change just by changing what we measure. I'm going to change my mute.
Yeah, and changing what you measure in what context? Like, is the marketing team, are all the people working on marketing getting a piece of commission from all of the commissions to get like all of the different projects that they're doing marketing for, or and someone owns and each one owns different relationships, but or yeah, I lost
this comes back around to something that we've been talking about here and there. We have a Catalyst proposal for implementing a system for Catalyst GPS to iterate on the methods that Catalyst can use to maybe create a more functional ecosystem of funding mechanisms. But coming back from that, which is very much project oriented, the idea of project oriented and like the idea of, well, this marketing path led to this project, therefore there is some percentage share of that project that marketing effort should have the credit for. Same pattern as we had on the sales side. That's one of the key techniques that I think may enable us to build up into, like, from bits into the whole of, like, the whole story of stake-based or equity-based compensation, or equity-based profit sharing. I did a few different times. I've worked for companies that made accounting software, and, like, traditional accounting systems, just they're there only for record keeping, and they're not really good at this kind of idea of programmatic rewards. And by contrast, the blockchain is really well set for it. Smart contracts, you have on a decentralized exchange, you may have dozens and hundreds, but not thousands, of different smart contracts for not reward pools, liquidity pools, and so on. But there's no reason that our ecosystem couldn't have thousands or even millions of smart contracts, each of them dealing with not one project, like, done collectively, or one protocol, but, like, there could be a smart contract that specifically governs one project and one type of contribution in that project, and all of the like, allocated profits that are attributable to that project could live together as part of the little story of what that project's delivered value was. And then, like, all those projects and all the dozens of smart contracts connected to the different contributors on all those different projects could build up into the full story of equity-based profit sharing across an entire protocol, or across more specifically an organization running on the platform.
Yeah, that was well articulated, I feel like. Thanks.
That is recorded. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, because it is to sort of bring it down from the conceptual, like, it is something that we need to address, otherwise we're going to rebuild the same old economy. And, we have the chance to sort of leapfrog a few, using some brain power to address the things that will occur as pitfalls, but then also, like, there are a few affordances, like a few things that we can reach for and be like, oh yeah, we could fix this future problem by having, like, this type of, like, pushing a model forward. Like, we've talked about this marketing kind of reputation-based sort of system, and then last week we talked about the startup and equity shares and things like that. Like, each one of these has little pitfalls that we've got to watch out for. And see, now as we build a new system out, like, how can we, baby and bathwater, like, saving baby, getting rid of bathwater. It's the game that we're in.
Just clean
it's
it.
Okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's actually a good sign that the baby's crying. It's actually a good sign. It's a good sign. Baby is not crying, then we got an issue.
I love it. Oh, and this goes to knowledge management, man, because like, how do we be able to track the different experiments that can be made, because this gets massively complex. So how do you get a view at it? And how do you see it? How do you analyze it after, like, let's say 2 years from now, and there are people working on the platform, there's 20 different organizations experimenting and running all these different smart contracts, accounting for reputation and treasury and all these different things. How are we going to be able to learn from the aggregate data set?
Yeah, that's that knowledge management, data analysis, data visualization, like
visualization. It's got to be visual for me.
Yeah. Rods and cones, man, like perspective and color, shape, all that stuff. That's important.
And just to put maybe too fine a point on it, what you're saying is that when we have some profit to share, we want to be able to see a picture of how that profit is being carved up, and to which projects, and then to which contributors, or at least to what kinds of work that originally were put in, and like those kind of visualizations are why you're.
Yeah, I want to see how the human energy is transmuted into value through the organization into the customer. And yes, it's the energy tracking and energy track the inputs. Yeah,
and that's tokenomics. And that's tokenomics in my like expanded sort of now vision of it. It's like, it's not just the pie chart with, this percentage and the roadmap.
Yeah,
like,
allocation,
okay, drop this stuff. It's that energy flow through the system, the tracking, measurement, and that's, that gets to the point of like what we measure. And because that's ultimately what it is. I mean, it's kind of like it's sort of invisible unless we measure it, right? Like the economy is going to happen. I think the data and the energy is going to get shifted through the system, and it's just how we look at it. I mean, like visible light spectrum, and then I guess the nature of reality and stuff. But anyway, without getting too far into that hole, but it is up to us to create a perceptive mechanism to, and then that can be what the value gets transferred around. I mean, I do think it is a knowledge management, as we work in an information economy. There's another term that all of a sudden gets a new meaning when you start thinking of it in this way. It's an information economy, like brand is information, and it can be represented, and the tools that we use to create things should help us or puts us in the direction, like it matches what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm. Mirror reflects.
Yeah. Ooh, y'all! I turned into a pumpkin at 2. It's lunchtime here in New York City, East Village. I gotta figure out how to turn my reputation points into lunch.
Yeah, I really love the ending of it, like the karmic oracle. Every DAO should have one, just telling the energies in the group and where they flow. Yeah, we should definitely have that. That sounds really great. Don't turn into pumpkin. Have a good lunch.
Yes.
Okay, y'all. Bye. Thank you. See you recording future me. I hope I sound cool. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Newman.
Love that guy.
I'm curious, for you, Lucas and Sandy, how much of this conversation feels like it's dealing with tokenomics?
It's a good question.
And how much it's not quite yet dealing with tokenomics?
I'm not sure I really understand the question, but Lucas, go ahead. You go first.
Tear us
I'll
apart,
just,
bro.
I'll say, yeah, it's before, like I said before, my earlier intervention, I just keep thinking about tokenomics, and so for me, I'm just dropping myself in here to get, take a bath in all your way of seeing things, because I just see things as profits, losses, assets and liabilities. Profits and losses, you do the results and you put it in the, so, and then because of what I was talking before, I just realized that type of rewards that expire in things, when you're actually, because the approach of assets, liabilities, and all those things, it's like you have a currency that's sort of universal, and you pay someone their paycheck, and that's, or a commission, and that's it, and they can go and use it. But what we're talking here is not about giving someone Bitcoin or Cardano. We're talking about giving our DAOs tokens, right? And so that's a lot like giving someone equity, not currency. And in that sense, I just realized that what for me, I've never dealt so much with equity. So, but it's completely different, obviously, because it's the sort of the body of the organization. And in that sense, for me, I'm drawing a parallel with what is equity in terms of being in the assets and liabilities of the company. And in that sense, it's like giving the person a share of the company, and it makes sense, a bit more sense, that it expires, or that it becomes harder or softer or weaker as the company becomes harder or stronger or weaker. Because if someone gave value and gets a bit of equity in that case, the company's token, so it makes a bit more sense that it comes back. So this is, again, to bring you to my point of view, and everything that you're talking, especially because I'm multitasking, is a bit a bit lost. I'm a bit lost in all the way you see things, but that's why I'm here, So the short answer to your question is not much of what you're talking about feels like tokenomics to me, because I'm used to raw facts. And also I keep going back to the thing of, there's that word of like, what's cypherpunks write code. And it's like what we're trying to do in the end is to try to find rules that can be put into code and all that. But the level of we talk about other things like meritocracies and all those things, which I think is more where you are. And I'm also like a functional analyst, so I like to think of those things, forget about the binaries and the logics and the what's codable, and think about merit and those broad things. So yeah, sorry, it's a bit long answer, but it's where I am.
Thank you.
Fair. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about purpose, like figure out what you want to get, and like the full context of the impact that it's going to provide, and then design for that. And a lot of this is about like really looking at the landscape of what results we want. And when we issue equity shares or tokens in a protocol, the like that's not the result. That's a mechanism intended to lead to the result that we want. And the result that we want is that token or series of tokens actually does create the delivered value. And yeah, I think that calling it equity and thinking of it as equity and ownership does make sense. Whether that's whether it turns out to be as one-dimensional as all that is seriously in question for me, because we've seen plenty of companies where people delivered very early value and then forever get this cash cow, even though they're not delivering future value at all. And so it doesn't seem like it's quite the right part of an ideal state. And I don't know that we'll be able to create an ideal state, but the questions are the interesting parts. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, I think for me, what comes up is I look at it from a standpoint of, with marketing, impact is so hard to kind of put weight to, because, for example, I could make a graphic, and the graphic might be the best graphic I could make in order to achieve the result. But if the momentum, or in which the structure of that marketing campaign is put to play, that graphic might not be as valuable anymore. But it's like, I already put in the effort to get that impact. That impact then has so many moving parts. But I also then think about that. I think this solves, in a way, or is working to solve, on how we can incentivize specialists or very experienced creatives to come in and participate long term. But we still need, lack of a better term, like employees, people to create graphics. And so in my head goes straight to a conversation we had previously about almost like an educational kind of process, where the impact can also be weighed and looked at as, hey, this is what you're getting from working with us. And then I think about, could there be created almost like a residency of, hey, you'll work with us at this point. These are the tasks and responsibilities you'll be trained to execute on, and will execute on, so that by the end of this residency, you have now this education, but also this portfolio. And then now the impact isn't just going, hey, what are you doing for us? It's also, what are we doing for you? And I think that's a way we can simplify the math as well. But yeah, so just my head, I think about it from that standpoint of, because with creative and marketing, there needs to be a lot of work done. So it's almost like, it's not even always just about quality. Now it's not, so the conversation is quantity versus quality, but now also versus consistency. Because if the quality is there and the quantity is there, but the consistency is not there, yes, you might have put in the impact in that 1 month or that 1 year, but if now the momentum is of that marketing is now gone, then how do you still validate that ownership of that impact if it's gone? So I'm more thinking of, how do we incentivize people on just that word impact of, hey, you'll help us, but we'll also help you back, and this is what you're getting, versus just only looking at it from an equity standpoint. But I think this does address how we can get an executive or somebody that understands the value of equity to come in and help. But now I'm thinking of, how do we incentivize the multiple people that are actually going to get the work done?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
unless we plan to give equity to everybody.
Co-ops are kind of set up for that, but
Did everyone not contribute?
Yeah, but then how do we weigh how they contributed if the actual contribution that we need from them is consistency?
So from what you'd recognize as tokenomics design perspective, like consistency could be incentivized by a technique where greater reputation leads to greater, you could say, greater vesting functions, or like a larger multiplier between the deferred value, or like the difference between your market rate and your direct payout. That deferred value might carry a greater multiplier the more reputation that you've built, or the more just contributions that you've made. And so you might see that after the first year, you've got 20% more rate of conversion between deferred value and future profit share. And after 2 years, it might be 25 or 30%. And after 3 years, maybe it's gone up to only 35%. You could imagine some kind of curve where like you're not getting better consistency by indefinitely escalating the reward structure.
Yeah.
Because like we want all of these mechanisms to actually be, what's the word, Maya? Sustainable, maybe even regenerative.
Yeah, I would go for regenerative. I'll always go for regenerative because we need to go beyond just the sustainable. Yeah.
Because like a lot of the times what we see in DeFi is these mechanisms that, you know, they promise these outrageous rewards, 1,600%, you know, APY, which is a bunch of crap. That's how you know the project is set up to fail in a year.
Yeah, or it always takes from somebody. It's just always like what reminds me is like there's always somebody somewhere in the end who pays, unless there's some kind of magic involved. But it's you know, like in whatever scale you look and in whatever thing you bring in, it's always just like that question you should ask yourself: who pays? So no, anyway, I can go on with that topic, but I don't think that was regenerative. Regenerative was what you asked.
Yeah. And like that element of valuing, like if what you're valuing is consistency to reward consistency.
Yeah. Well, this, I see this. That's what, speaking to the regenerative, like it takes time to drive a network. Circling back to even before we started the recording, it takes time to drive network. So you need to have people like Sandy seems to keep circling back to like need for employees, someone to do the work while other people like do other components of it, and so there is and the desire to be able to essentially bring and train people into your trade of whatever you're doing, so apprenticeships and whatnot. And maybe this is a part of a regenerative component is and the knowledge management side is how are we managing our knowledge to be able to train people for the hybrid set of skills that we're offering to our customers. And it could be as specific as content creation or marketing, but it probably incorporates other things, you know. And what most organizations don't just do, well, I don't know, they try and do one thing, but there is a lot of different things to track and manage, and the ability to train people in each of those roles is fundamental to the regenerative nature of that entity. That's, I mean, this is solving churn issues with any business or industry and whatnot. So the education component, I think, is highlighting for me coming out of this conversation.
Traditional businesses are built on a founder owning it and maybe, but not necessarily, sharing some of the benefits of ownership with some of its employees. And I think there's something that's basic to human psychology where people do want and expect that if they've built a business that they continue to get some rewards that are maybe larger than people who weren't there at the start, or people who came and went, or to people who, or maybe not as much to people who were there long term.
I think that has to do with the friction to get started, though. And if you reduce a lot of friction to start, then that sentiment largely goes out the way. And when my first boss is out of college, he had that mentality. It was like, I was sleeping in the truck every night. You guys have it good. You get sleep at your beds at night most nights, you know, like whatever. We're complaining about being gone, like having to stay at other traveling when that wasn't what we were hired to do and stuff like that, because he's accepting jobs that are too far away and stuff like that. It's like, hey, I don't get to accept the jobs, but this is not what I want to do anyway. That's rabbit trail. But the friction to start might be a reduction, especially in in a co-op format, you know. I think that sentiment is a little less spicy to me.
Yeah, some of that is resonant for me. But just like, if we make it easier for people to get their organizations going, they may not feel as much of that, but they're probably always going to feel like if they were there longer, they should accrue more rewards than the person who's not there longer.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
And yet I also have a suspicion that they wouldn't mind sharing some rewards with someone who had been there maybe a medium amount of time and then left. And just so long as the rewards that that person gets are not like unlimited forever, I'm beholden to them.
What's the word when you know, this company has all the people that went through the company and then left, but they're still in the alumni, right? So it sounds like you're talking about now some sort of like an alumni or something of that effect. People that have been in the company and that have contributed, but like in a long-term thing. Then we have a notion of the equity-like token, and then we have like the paycheck, which should be in Cardano in this case, which is like the paycheck to be spent. So it's weird, you know. I'm coming like from completely shooting in all directions type of way. I'm not used to thinking about these things, but if I was going to set up a DAO currently, that's the type of differences that I'm starting to see. One thing is that you give that type of alumni or or forever token. Another thing is equity that impacts the stability of the organization. And yeah, just a thought.
That was good. I hadn't thought of like an alumni sector of member or something that is still marginally compensated for the impact that they generated while they were participating in the DAO, or but maybe it's like a pool or something, and as you fade out, if you fade out on good terms, you end up in that pool, versus yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it. It's good.
One of the difficulties that math-oriented people, I think, have with tokenomics, when they think of things in terms of like equity percentages, is like, hey, I have this number of tokens. It's always going to be worth the percentage, but which is pretty typically true in like the old stock market world, right? If you've got 1 million shares of IBM, you have 1 million shares of IBM, and and boy, you're sitting pretty, depending on what Wall Street's doing this week. But like in the DAO space, do you have to mint a fixed number of tokens and then distribute them, and then you can't distribute anymore? You just have to like move tokens around. My intuition is that a protocol could be better served by incrementally minting only the tokens that it needs to acknowledge new contributions and like balance the new contributions against the value of the prior contributions, and like put them into this dynamic balance that includes investors, it includes contributors, it includes customers and the profits, and that like fundamentally whatever we do is designed to benefit the organization and all of its people. And so like how we arrange that dynamic is kind of, well, it's important, but like by recognizing that there is a long-term timeline, that there is a long-term story of expected future profits, and that we're always going to have to like let new people in to share in building the company into that place of delivering future profits. And so the intuition is that carving it all up to at the beginning is just setting up for inequality. But that doesn't mean that you can either say, well, we'll just issue some tokens now, and if you don't keep contributing, you're going to be diluted down to nothing. Like I feel like there's got to be a balance there where today's contributions carry some weight over a time scale, and then if you continue to be contributing, then you're counteracting dilution. And then the question of like what happens in the middle of that time range, say you're talking about a 10-year timeline, you can imagine how you start, you can imagine what things are like at the end, and like how you get from here to there, and like how the dynamic changes in between. To me, that's kind of at the heart of tokenomics design. Because you want to set it up so that it's good for people, you know, on a horizon that we can imagine, and not just good for today, and not just good for us, and don't care about those other guys that are actually gonna make the difference between 5 million in revenue and 50 million in revenue.
This is kind of wow.
They're only worth 1/10 of today of what we're worth today. We're making more impact.
Yeah, but this is just so wow, actually, to think, you just use those concepts, that 7 generational kind of, that's of course like totally much more further, but in general that alumni as a longer period, and just kind of historical period, just thinking about it, well, in 30 years, what is our heritage there, and just using kind of those exercises and coming up with the new structures, I think is insanely cool. Because indeed, if we're only thinking about today and tomorrow, just so often you just even open up any kind of DAO and tokenomics there, and you haven't been there from day one, and you're like, yeah, this it's not worth it anymore. Like, you have that feeling very often. It's like they have figured it out. It's already outdated because they were thinking about that day one. So just kind of stepping into that mindful generational space. I like this I think this what I can't pronounce name, Kyrgyzstan or something, the video, and they had this, how many people are going to come after you, or how many people are before you, and it's like you watch that video and you're like, this is just mind-blowing of how many people will come in the next century or two, or even in 100 years. So anything we do has any, even incremental thing has a significant impact on the long term. Much, but then again, it also has no impact. So we can just experiment. So it's like, it just gets me like really, really excited just to, try to kind of reframe the thinking and just immerse yourself kind of in there. So that was kind of really, really cool. Love it.
It really puts me in the mind of the necessity for there to be like some mechanisms for simulation. So, if you do this thing today and some range of things happens out into the future, what's this impact there on that range of things? Like financial stimulations of the future.
Right. Damn.
You're right. Zero and all impact. That's what you need to grasp. Getting spiritual here again. Yeah.
All right. It's 2:30.
Feels like a good wrapping point.
Yeah.
Lucas, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your perspective and input.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit scattered, but I'm really happy to sit in, and I hope you guys don't take offense in me just hopping in and out. But yeah, like I said, I'm digging into so many things currently, from product management to Plutus and that thing, looking into NFTs, looking into running my own node and maybe exposing it to some students in South Africa. And it's like, I'm really trying to help. Yesterday, Juan, he has this balance initiative. I found myself yesterday on the Cardano builders with Matthias Spielberg, I think, and I just volunteered to make Juan's websites, and I have that thing. So I need to, yeah. And in the middle, I'm sitting in on a lot of calls. So, yeah. So
it's great to have you, and good to be able to do osmosis and share a little bit of our perspective with you, and have a little bit of yours to influence our direction.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Sandy, how's your? Oh, go ahead. With the recording button, yeah.
Yeah. Bye.